The rumour mill is spinning fast right now with respect to the Paramount Skydance merger and what it could mean for the Star Trek franchise. Now, there's no doubt that Skydance recognises the massive commercial value of Star Trek, but it must also understand that damage has been done to the brand in the eyes of millions of fans around the world. Specifically, the unwanted transformation the franchise went through, beginning with the tonal and visual reboot of the 2009 J.J. Abrams movie and subsequent Kelvin timeline movies, which bear really only a passing resemblance to past Star Trek. Then in 2017, with the dark, depressing Star Trek Discovery, with unlikable, unrelatable characters and some jarring canonical breaks. Turns out the Spock we knew and loved had a super secret human sister in his childhood, and she was human, and we were never told about her. And her name is Michael Burnham. Yes, her name is Michael. And she was a diverse messianic Mary Sue who always seemed to be the key to saving the Federation in any given situation. And she made Spock the man that we knew in the original series. Star Trek Picard was a series that gave us clunky, disjointed plots, detestable and bland characters, and F-bombs, as well as gratuitous, disturbing violence, with only a decent third season giving us a bittersweet taste of what the series could have and should have been from the beginning. Star Trek continued to reinvent itself for a modern audience by creating a Star Trek comedy animated series called Lower Decks, something that would have just been unthinkable in the 90s. Because apparently all of the parodies and spoofs of Star Trek throughout the decades weren't enough. Official Star Trek had to produce a self-aware send-up to the franchise. A Star Trek comedy filled with inside jokes and tongue-in-cheek winks and nods to canon. I don't think something like this would ever have gotten the green light under Rick Berman. And I doubt Gene Roddenberry would have approved of the franchise deliberately descending into outright farce. Prodigy is another animated series, more aimed at children, with characters that look like a mix between Guardians of the Galaxy and Monsters, Inc., and Strange New Worlds, a prequel to the original series that's probably the best of the bunch actually, despite inconsistent quality, and throwing in way too many gimmick episodes and turning Spock into the butt of the jokes. But it's also ridiculous to think that this series, with its significant design changes to the Enterprise and uniforms, could ever be considered a believable prequel to the original series. And the less said about the upcoming Star Trek Section 31 TV movie, the better. I don't need to explain to you why this looks nothing like Star Trek. I think you can see that on screen for yourself. The issue is that the Star Trek brand doesn't really mean very much now to a lot of fans these days. For them, and certainly for people like me, Star Trek, as I knew it and loved it, ended with a rather mediocre Enterprise episode in 2005. And everything that's come since then has been, I don't know, some sort of big budget fan fiction from some hellish nightmare universe. I had hoped that one day Star Trek would return to what it used to be and start telling stories in the 24th and 25th centuries, but with the exception of Star Trek Picard, what we've gotten over the last few years was a complete reboot and an entirely different product that wasn't really Star Trek. And it began with those Kelvin timeline movies, which I still detest to this day. Although it does appear, and I see this in comments sometimes, there's now a generation of young people, I guess they're probably like 30 now. They're in their 30s, but maybe they were in their teens when the first film came out in 2009. And they now look back with rose-tinted glasses at those movies, which I have to kind of wince at, you know? It's just like that was one of their early introductions to Star Trek in cinema. So they kind of have this love for those Kelvin timeline movies, which is fine if that's your thing, but it's not really what Star Trek was at its heart. But I remember thinking at the time that you can't reboot Star Trek. It has its own chronology of events and dates, you know, places and times and characters that took decades for writers to develop across multiple TV series and, of course, several feature films. And it's like taking Tolkien's work. It's like taking The Lord of the Rings and rebooting his lore and... Oh, wait, that actually happened. My bad. Anyway, Star Trek was rebooted and it was the wrong decision. as some of us said at the time, because it became something entirely different. Though I don't think many could have envisaged just how different it would end up becoming, how divorced and separated from canon it really felt. Now, rumors are swirling about what Skydance could do for Star Trek with this merger with Paramount, or whether it'll have much impact at all. One thing Skydance would have to realize, if Star Trek is to be saved, is that the brand is not in a good shape in the eyes of fans, and that would have to change. I mean, that can only change by bringing on board people who understand and love Star Trek, and who are fans who miss what the franchise used to be. You know, seeing the Otoy Roddenberry archive short movies shows us that there's talented people with a deep understanding of the mythology who could do great things if given the chance. However, Star Trek can't get too invested in its own nostalgia and member berries and the past. It also has to have a vision for the future. It has to make actual progress and go in the right direction. And one rule that I would make if I was in charge is no more prequels. A changing of the guard with respect to Star Trek's management, and hopefully the end of the secret hideout influence, would potentially open up the inevitable conversation about where the franchise goes next. But I think that conversation can only be had in the context of first addressing where it's been recently, specifically what is canon and what isn't. The whole multiverse thing is a tired trope now, but it just further complicates things. It might be the only way, however, to decide upon a specific consistent storytelling course and continuity for the future of the franchise. That means deciding what is and what isn't going to be included in Star Trek's historical timeline. Whatever the outcome, whoever gets the reins of Star Trek, they've inherited a mess. Just as pretty much any showrunner or producer taking over creative control of the likes of Doctor Who or Star Wars, Star Trek has also been wrecked by bad writing, poor decision making, and a desire to subvert fan expectations or tell stories for a modern audience. I don't envy anyone brought in to resolve these issues. The franchise is going to continue, that's for sure. It's debatable whether it should continue at this point, because I believe its best days are behind it. But it's time for a line to be drawn in the sand in terms of canon.
The line must be drawn here. This far, no farther.
Yep, that's pretty much my thinking. That about does it for today, guys. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. If you like my sci-fi commentaries here on YouTube, you might also like my new sci-fi novel, Deus Ex Machina. It's available in ebook, paperback, and audiobook formats from the links below. Be sure to pick up a copy. The ebook is just $4.99. Thanks a lot for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.